thank you everyone for joining this webinar on managing the trickiest parts of patient communication. First, we're going to cover the benefits of strong patient communication. Some of them are not obvious. Number two is the expectations. What do patients actually expect? There's a communication model we're going to introduce you to today. It's not super complicated, but it is going to help you develop the framework, because we can give you a ton of tips here, but we want to also prepare you. If you face a situation we did not cover, which is very likely, then this model will help you. Hey, what should I do here? Like, how should I communicate with this patient? What should I keep in mind? So number 4, barriers. So what are the barriers? What can go wrong? Where can, you're saying X and they hear Y. Where can we go wrong in patient communication? Number 5 is putting those skills into action. We're going to show you some common situations and how to really step it up a bit and level up those skills. And then how to measure communications to improve your results. Now, as I said earlier, I am Neil Kotari, the Chief Operating Officer of PracticeWeb. And so if you've joined these webinars before, I'm a very familiar face and person for you, but I'm going to be your guide here today. And with PracticeWeb itself, those who are new to PracticeWeb or are currently not on PracticeWeb, we do want to share that we have a very, very good reputation, and that's all because we try to go the extra mile, including webinars like this. We try to go the extra mile to help partner in your success. We want to see you successful. If you thrive, then we thrive. And so that's why we are in business, to help you thrive. So we've been doing practice management solutions since 1994. We have been helping and do help solo to multi-location practices, as well as generalist to specialist, everyone in between. And then finally, we do provide an all-in-one solution. So whether it's text messaging to in-office paperless forms, to e-prescribing, to your fundamental practice management tasks, we do it all and we provide it all. So we want to be that one-stop shop for you to help you thrive. If you're watching this on YouTube, we would love for you to like the video, subscribe, and that helps you get notified for any new videos we post on there, which we're doing all the time, which help you get more education. Now let's step into the first one, which is benefits of effective communication. So benefits of effective communication. The first thing here to understand is patient satisfaction is equal to expectations minus reality. If they have expectations coming in, like when I come in, I'm going to be warmly greeted. When I go to the back, I'm going to get a full explanation from my provider. They're not going to rush me through. They're going to explain everything that needs to be done very carefully in language that I understand, right? These are different types of expectations. If you meet those expectations or exceed them, then you're going to get a higher level of satisfaction or happiness. If they expect those things, but you give them a poor experience in one of those areas, then they're going to be upset and possibly leave a bad review and go somewhere else, right? So this is really the formula that's behind everything. Now, how does communication further impact patient happiness? 68% of patients say that providers need to improve how they interact with them. So, most patients are not happy with provider communication. Obviously, you can't please some people. They're very, they have very high expectations. But if 68%, the vast majority, are saying that we need more communication, better interactions, that really means something. 4 in 5 complaints that you have in your office, on average, could have been resolved with better communication, either upfront, during the situation, or afterwards. So this really does help keep people happy if you have better communication. And it's also the #1 strongest predictor of patient satisfaction ratings. Now, it also helps with errors. So 80% of medical, dental errors are tied to poor communication. If something was done that they didn't want to be done, etc. Those are kind of errors here, but other errors as well can be tied back to that. And then also malpractice suits. So that's the worst case scenario, but we want to prevent that. So if you have proper communication, you can actually prevent that from happening. So this is really important stuff. Now, what else can you see from like kind of secondary benefits? Team morale, right? So if you have great communication, you have happy patients, you're going to have your morale go up for your team and better collaboration internally. Case acceptance will go up because now you're really educating them. And then efficiency, you're not going to have patients kind of calling in and confused about things. If you just handle it with your protocols, they're going to be well educated. They're not going to take up more of your time unnecessarily, and that'll improve your efficiency in other ways as well. So now that we know all the great benefits, what do patients actually expect from you? These are the traits that, based on a very large survey, these are the traits that patients want in their provider. Number one is confidence. So this is, in a way, obvious, but it's not the reality all the time. Like if you have a newer associate dentist, or if you have a doctor that is kind of in a new, dabbling in a new specialty, or front office, you have a new front office person who doesn't really have it together yet because they're new, or if you have, a new type of insurance and you're trying to figure out what to do, this is not only applicable to providers, but also I think to staff members. So confidence, it's not about faking it till you make it, but to an extent, you want to portray that you are an authority, you are the expert, right? Empathetic, you want to make sure that you put yourself in their shoes and understand their pain points, where they're coming from. It could be a financial empathy, it could be a clinical empathy, it could be a psychological, like they just don't like being at the doctor, at the dentist. So just having that empathy is really important. Being humane, being friendly, another way to say friendly, just being humane, giving them positive reinforcement. So for example, if someone's having bad hygiene, you don't want to make them feel guilty about that, but you want to point out what they're actually maybe doing good, maybe the little silver lining, make that seem bigger. And then, hey, let's also take care of this aspect where maybe you can improve. So being humane, being personal. I think we don't take enough time. We all know this is helpful, but we don't always take the time. We're rushed. So that's why you got to make sure your exams are long enough. I know that's a controversial topic, but maybe you want to extend that exam from 30 minutes to 45 minutes just so you can do more of this personal touch, right? And that's going to pay dividends down the road. We're not trying to have a new patient come in and then never come in again. We want to build lifelong relationships. So being that personal, having that personal touch. So asking about their trips, asking about their hobbies. In Practice Web, you can actually note down a lot of this information in the clinical chart, right? So that is going to be very, very important to then bring up the next time. Being very frank. So this means having plain language. So here's an example: precarious lesion, or you have a lesion pre-cavity. Hey, this is going to develop towards a cavity. If we don't do something here, you're going to have a big hole in your tooth. Like literally use whatever language that will match their comprehension level. You don't have to, confidence and seeming like the expert doesn't mean you have to talk like an expert, right? Sometimes people get that confused. If I put it too simple, they won't think I'm really knowledgeable what I'm talking. But we want to be frank and direct. Respectful is an important thing. Giving them a hand in their decision making. There's a balance between being very aggressive in case presentation, for example, and then giving them the control of their dental hygiene and what they want to do in their mouth and with their teeth. So giving them options and being respectful for their desires. And then thorough, like making sure if there's something else you need to check, if you need to take one more x-ray to really thoroughly check something, if you need to look at it closely, then being thorough. And so these are the things that they want based on a very wide-ranging survey of several thousand patients. Now, how can we get that done, right? We know the expectations. We know why it matters. How can we get it done? So Berlo's communication model, as I said earlier, this model is very, very popular. They teach this like if you take a communications course in college, but it really helps put everything in a nice framework. You are the source. In this model, you are the source of the information, of the communication. There's a message you want to convey. You're going to encode that message, like put it in certain words, or and we're going to cover each of these points separately. But you're going to encode a message. You're going to send the message through some channel, and then the receiver is your patient for the most part, and they're going to decode your message. They're going to try to understand and interpret the message, right? So this is the overall very high level framework of all communication. Now, when they get that, they're also going to give you feedback where the reverse will happen. They'll send you back a message through that channel. You'll try to interpret what they're saying and understand that and decode it. Now, how does this happen in dentistry? For example, like, you have, an example would be a doctor verbally tells a patient that they can take care of a cavity. So that's kind of the message you're trying to convey. You're verbally telling them. And then the patient will pick up on all kinds of messages that are mixed in. Like there might be music in the office. They have a warm blanket. The office smells like lavender. His mouth tastes fresh. These environmental things can either help or hurt. So when you say, we can take care of this cavity, hopefully they will hear, we'll take care of this cavity. This is a very basic example, right? The problem, this is the problem example of that. So the problem would be same thing. Doctor finds a carie. All they do is communicate, hey, we see this cavity here. This is a problem. So the patient might be listening to a handpiece in the background. They see an anesthetic out, like on the table, which is kind of scaring them. He smells like another scent that's kind of distracting, a clove scent, let's say. The office might be hot. It's not, you don't have the AC turned on properly. His mouth doesn't taste good or feel good at that point. You know, it tastes like bacteria decay. So he's maybe hearing a different message that there's something bad happening. Not that we're going to take care of it for you. There's something bad in my mouth. I need to panic right now. I need to like get worried. So he's not reassured. He's actually getting worried. And that's kind of the problem. So you can see how all these things can disrupt what you're trying to accomplish. So what are the barriers? So I already kind of showed you an example of that, but here let's break this down. So the source, it really matters what communication skills you have. So for example, you know, reading, listening, and speaking, you know, have good communication skills. The provider, for example, provider might explain the treatment, but that needs to be in layman's terms. That's just a very basic example of communication skills. Then attitudes, like, you know, the attitude of the source or the receiver. In this case, the receiver may have certain attitudes. The patient may feel bad for neglecting their oral health. They might have a guilt trip going on, right? So that can affect the whole communication process. The knowledge about the topic, the patient doesn't understand what it means, like a wait and see approach. That could be an example of that. But knowledge about the topic, for them, it's foreign, right? Dentistry could be foreign. That's going to affect the communication. Social station, whatever social system the receiver has, even the source has, can affect things. That's really interesting. So, you know, there might be a background of the patient where they're intimidated, like they're intimidated by the dentist. So they're like not going to ask you questions, right? You can see how this really impacts the whole communication flow. So they may not ask questions because they're intimidated. There may be a cultural, you know, point here that people may be coming from a culture where you only go to see a doctor when you really have like pain. You don't go for preventive care. You don't go for hygiene, regular hygiene. You only go for a problem. That may be with their cultural background. Now that's going to affect how they interpret and process your message that we should take care of this before it gets worse, right? So you can see how culture can build into this whole thing. It's really, really interesting. So interestingly enough, even race can matter. There's a very wide survey done by the actual US government, the Department of Health and Human Services, where they found that white patients, 8% of the time, they'll say a provider doesn't listen carefully to me. Whereas on Hispanic patients, it's like almost 11 to 12%. And also they may say, and this is a more drastic discrepancy here. Providers may say, Hispanic patients may say much more often that providers don't explain things in a way that I can understand. That could be a language issue. It could be a cultural issue. Whatever it is, it's the reality. Whereas white patients say that less often or give that feedback. So, you know, this is where we have to put extra focus on, you know, these different specialty groups like minorities, older people, those with disabilities, mental health issues, you know, people with multiple dental issues going on in their mouth, and then diverse populations. You have to really keep this in mind and take that extra step to make sure your communication is happening the way you want it. Now, the next part we talked about in that Berlo's model is the message itself, the content. So we talked about source and what are the potential barriers and pitfalls and how we can look at that. Now the message itself. So the entire end-to-end message, the content matters. So it's not just the source, but the content. So for example, doctor discussing treatment options and investments of you know, what's that going to cost. That content, how you present the content itself will make a difference. Gestures, signs, body language, this is in-person stuff. So if you're smiling, you're speaking calmly with an even tone, that's going to be much more effective than if you're like rushing through it and, you know, being very kind of like condescending, etc., even unknowingly. So those elements of the message, you know, matter. Then treatment. So how the message is packaged, that's what it means, how it's packaged. So you kind of like, there's all these different theories. You know, there's good news and bad news could be a way to do it, or kind of using a sandwich technique where you start with the good, sandwich it with the constructive or bad, like what we need to take care of, and then end with a good kind of positive aspect to your message. Now, going back to this elements thing, that's where this, what you see on the left side. So here, what it means, let me go back once. So what it means is that your patients aren't just picking up the words you're saying, it's what you're doing when you say them. And, you know, some people say like the body language is a huge amount of the interpretation. So you can say like 7% here. There's a theory. This theory says 7% is the actual content, which is very low. 38% actually matters how you, the volume, the tone, the intonation you use when you're talking. So you guys, you know, this is kind of like, you might think mushy stuff, like soft stuff, but this actually makes a difference. That's why you got to really train each other to make sure even your volume, tone, intonation is correct. And then nonverbal cues like crossing your hands versus having open hands. There's all this stuff that makes a huge difference, and you're gonna see real results from that. Now, then the last point here is structure. So like treatment planning, right? This is really, you know, beginning with the simplest treatment plan option. That's an example. But ultimately, it's giving the right structure of your message so they don't get overwhelmed. That's important. Starting with the bridge as an option versus an implant, right? That's going to make a difference. And then last thing is code. So how did you send the message? It matters. Like whether you text something versus say something verbally. Sometimes you got to pick up the phone no matter how bad you want to send a text. And believe me, I'm all about texting. We really love texting, but sometimes you got to call, and sometimes you do not want to call. You don't want to bother your patient with like a simple reminder. You just want to send a text message. So that is going to make a difference in how they take your message, your communication. Now, the code or the form used to send the message, just to expand on that, what I was just saying, like, so there's all these different options. You got to figure out what is the right option in every scenario, whether it's verbal, maybe it's like printing something out for them to take home, maybe it's a text message, right? 42% of patients say that the effort it takes to connect with their provider is the biggest barrier to communication. There's so many barriers we put in place where they can't even talk to their provider, whether it's even in the office. The provider's hustling in and out of exams, and the patient's like, I can't even talk to the guy I came to see here. Or if they're outside the office, they can't even get a clinical person on the line, right? That's a big problem. If they need a clinical person on the line, you got to put a clinical person on the line. You can't just stop them at the front office, even though you're busy. There's a big negative impact of that. So 42% says it's too hard to connect with their provider and kind of communicate. Now, the next thing here is I want to talk about channel, right? So channel is actually like the 5 senses, if you can think of 5 senses. So hearing, this is obvious. The patient hears you talk, your words, your tone, your volume. So that's going to affect, like I said earlier, it's going to affect how they get that communication. The seeing part, so here's where it gets interesting. So models, like demonstrative models you have, showing them a model, having them see their x-rays, their treatment plans. Your body, your appearance also matters. So are you dressed professionally, or are you kind of disheveled? You look frantic, or you look calm. So seeing is believing, as they say. So showing models, showing x-rays, showing your appearance, your body language. And then the next thing is touching. So this means like being very gentle, right? So you may be saying, you know, this will be very fast when you're taking a posterior x-ray. But if the patient is uncomfortable, they're hearing, you know, put up with this, or I don't care if it's uncomfortable, right? You may be saying one thing, but they don't feel that comfort. They don't feel that. So think about like, okay, you add a blanket into the mix. You add maybe some audio video into the mix where you put a screen on your ceiling where they can watch something, or you have those glasses where they can watch something, virtual reality, whatever. There's so much stuff nowadays. So touching is not just like us physical touching and doing the thing, but also what they feel with their senses of touching. And then smelling. So we don't actually think about this in dentistry enough. Like when you open up a tooth and it smells like decay or infection, the patient is smelling something bad, and it becomes part of the message, the experience. So your scent too, your body odor, too much cologne or perfume, that becomes part of your message, right? This is all messaging. So if you have something nice, lavender, something nice in the operatory, It's really going to help put them at ease where they can interpret your message better, your communication. And then tasting, this is also a big one because again, you have so many different dental materials that you're using. So you have to just think about that. Like, what is the taste experience for the patient? What happens? You have all these things we already covered, right, in the source message channel receiver. Now, what happens is a bunch of noise, right? So what do I mean by noise? I'm going to break it down really quickly here. There's physical noise. So, and some of this you can't prevent, but just be aware of it, that it's going to affect your communication impact. So hand pieces, suction, other patients, staff chatter, children, traffic that's outside that they can hear, weather. So all these physical, environmental things, that can create noise that either positively or negatively impacts your message. But here we're talking about more negative stuff. So physical weaknesses and sicknesses, if they have pain, that's obviously going to make them less attentive until the pain is solved. Headaches, room temperature, vision and hearing impairments, that can kill your communication. Psychological factors like anxiety and phobias, that's important. Financial concerns, they're really stressed out about that. Mental health issues and COVID worries right now, that's a big deal. So these can also kill your communication if you don't address them. Different meanings. So dental jargon, we talked about that. Layman's terms is really, really important. Don't get into expert mode. Whether you're even in insurance billing, like it's not just a provider challenge, it's a front office challenge. Like insurance billing, if you get into that jargon and they're like totally confused, then it's going to kill your communication. So jargon, wherever it is, kill it. Go simple. Alternate word meanings, if you have meanings that can mean several different things, that's going to cause problems. So over here, like when you here's an example actually for the clinical side. So there's studies showing that if you talk about periodontal disease, the patient actually hears that it's untreatable. So periodontitis or advanced gum disease might be preferable because you want to make them feel like, hey, we can solve this problem. This is a problem to solve. This is not like a disease where I'm just stuck with it, and no matter what I do, I'm stuck with it. So are you kind of breaking that down? That's how minute we can get with this stuff, right? So that is the thing. And so with semantics, it's really important, complicated language. And then cultural, last thing here is how you speak and behave can be perceived differently. We talked about that study earlier. So for example, people from South America, I mean, I'm just giving an example, can tend to be close talkers. They talk really close and prefer to stand about 2 point, this is actually studies done, 2.5 feet away. Romanians who are maybe not close talkers, the opposite, they stand 4.5 feet away. Americans are somewhere in the middle. So if you stand too close or too far, or if you stand too close, it's intimidating. If you're too far, it might be like distant and uncaring. So that's what I mean by postures, gestures, eye contact, interpersonal space is what I was just referring to as well, touching, and some going back to semantics, right? So culturally, when you say something, it can be interpreted differently by a specific culture. You have to be clear on these things. Now, that was a lot of information, and that actually wasn't even the nitty-gritty that we're going to get into in scenarios, but that's really the framework of communication. All right, so putting your skills into action. Now, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Maya Angelou, this is a writer talking about feelings, and that's what's important. It's not the words, it's the feelings, right? Ultimately, that's what they take away. Now, scenario one, this is a lot of information here, guys, so get tight and fasten your seatbelts here. But the initial contact. Now, be prepared. So what you can do here for be prepared, these are, and I'm going to kind of build in some practice web things here so that you can see the practical way you can help use software to help you. But be prepared, whether you use Smart Caller ID, which we offer, or not. Be prepared in the conversation that you're about to have with the patient. Don't go in blind. So what this does, Smart Caller ID, is helps you, like this is when they call in, you are prepared. We're giving you all the intel you need when they call in, what their next appointment is, what the treatment plan looking like, what's their account balance. Everything's right in your face. You can check benefits right there, then and there. So you're prepared. Now, if you don't use this, if you're going to do an outbound call, there's no excuse not to be prepared. You can get your ducks in a row and then call someone, right? So that's number one. Number two, introduce yourself. This is important, and we're talking a lot about here new patient stuff too. So when a patient calls, treat it like an in-person interaction, right? That'll help. Say the name of the practice and the doctor and your name when you answer, always. Don't just skip that. That's very, very important. But this is your first kickoff here. Smile. Even when you're on the phone, smile. This is something they teach in sales, that if you're smiling, if you're laughing, it's really going to come through unknowingly in your tone and stuff. So smiling is important, but definitely when you're in person, you got to do that. Now, next thing is listen. Stop what you're doing and genuinely listen to what the patient is saying. A lot of times you'll miss things. Repeat back. This is a step that we often skip. We kind of assume we know what they want, but we don't repeat back. So tell the patient what you understand their concern is and what they want, and make sure that this prevents any errors in communication. Offer solutions. You are the expert, so tell them what their options are, what's going to work best, and then ask them which of the solutions they want. For example, we have emergency appointments today at 8, 2, and 4. I recommend taking the 8 a.m. because that will give the doctor more time to work you in if the tooth needs treatment. Now ask what they want. What do you prefer, of course, but make sure that you're putting them in charge of their care. Provide additional information like an explanation about the actions you've taken, what they should expect before the visit. Hey, I've entered you in the system now. You're scheduled. Now you're going to get the forms online. Look out for those. When you arrive, this is what we're going to do. This is what's going to happen during the visit. Don't just schedule them and then hang up the phone, right? If they have a little bit of time, spend an extra minute or minute and a half to give them that kind of roadmap, right? A roadmap of what's going to happen with this visit that they're going to have. And make sure they know how to get in touch with you before the appointment. Hey, if something comes up, here's how you get in touch with us. And I have you down, so here's an example. I have you down for 8 a.m. for doctor to look at that tooth. Please arrive at 7:45. If it needs treatment, we'll try to work it in. I'm going to email you a link to your paperwork for you to complete in advance. Your, let's say, Delta Dental Insurance should pick up the charge for the exam, and we'll go over any costs with you once the doctor sees what's going on. That should be like the closing sort of discussion there. And then ask for questions at the end. Leave it open-ended. What questions do you have for me? That's a great open-ended. Following up with documents. So we want to simplify this with on-demand texting, right? Be efficient here. So what we can do here is ensure that the patient gets some form of written record of the conversation and links to any documents like paperwork, like forms. So for example, this text message is great. You can actually customize this in Practice Web. It was great talking to you. We'll see you at 7:45 a.m. Here's a link to your paperwork so you can complete it in advance. Feel free to text me or call me back at this number if you have any questions. Using the word me is actually very powerful here. It might be not obvious, but I like me better than us, because me means like they have a advocate now in the office that's looking out for them. Me, I'm personally, and it doesn't matter if you don't respond, even if Sally, Jessica took the call, but Sally responded, they're not going to care, but that's going to give that personal kind of reassurance that I'm here for you. But this is the follow-up, process that you should have. Now, this is just showing an example of how they're going to fill out their forms, which is really nice on our mobile forms. They can fill out their forms if you're using our mobile. And this mobile forms are actually free with your support. Texting is a very small additional cost. It's really minimal. And I'm going to share that with you at the end of this webinar. But this is what basically we want to do. Now, scenario number 2, intake. So intake, again, be prepared. Know in advance if the patient's insurance has been verified and if the paperwork is in. Know that in advance. When they come in, welcome them. Don't just hand them a clipboard, or I've seen many times where they don't even greet you. You just walk in and you kind of like, okay, I guess I have to sign my name here, and then sit down. And there's like a sign there. No one says anything. It's like very cold, emotionally cold, not physically. So welcome them in, take that extra step, greet them by name, welcome them, and introduce, and let them know what you'll be doing with them when you're talking to them. When they walk in, paperwork, an office tour maybe, which we're going to talk about, and give a brief overview. And this is more so for, again, new patients. So a lot of this does apply to existing patients, but is also for new patients mainly. So give them an overview of what you're going to be doing and the company or the office policies and where to get information. Make sure they're comfortable before moving forward. Listen, don't just listen to the words, listen for hesitation and mumbled words. These things and certain types of body language show that the patient has concerns or questions that haven't been addressed. Give a tour. So here is if it's a new patient, obviously not for existing patients, but new patients, the bathrooms is obvious, but then The hygiene station, if there's a hygiene station, when I go to the dentist, I know I thoroughly brush my teeth because I don't want them to see gunk in my teeth. I feel bad. That's just my personality. Like I don't go in with gunky teeth and make them. I want to be having shining teeth when I go in. So they may want to do that. They might want to have a hygiene station where they can do. And this may be the bathroom. Probably is the bathroom. Technology. Show them your awesome technology. If you've spent the money, spend a few seconds, point it out. This is gonna instantly give you credibility. Instantly develop trust between you and the patient. So CBCT, CEREC machine, 3D, 3D machines you have. Show them that you're on the cutting edge if you have that stuff, whatever it is. Show the credentials of the doctor, degrees, CE, professional organizations. Have a little section in your office where there's like, it's just on the wall that you can point out. And don't just point it out, but stop there. Hey, stop there if you can. Talk about the doctor, have those degrees in the background where it's kind of like emphasizing what you're saying, but talk about how great the doctor is that they're going to see that day. It doesn't have to take a whole lot of time. It's like a 1-minute thing. And then smile gallery, if you have one, whether it's like a book or on the wall, show them that in the tour. Show them sterilization, just a quick view. That's giving them reassurance again that they're going to keep them safe. Again, guys, this is the tour we're talking about here. Practice story. If there's culture, if it's a family-run practice or the dentist is a multi-generation, we have a lot of clients that are, the son of the father who's now a dentist who's took over. That just, again, it's really, really interesting, right? Why do people like a lot of these Marvel movies, right? The origin story. Everyone loves the origin story. Where did this superhero come from? That's why usually the first movie is more popular than the sequel, because the first movie covers that origin story and everyone loves a good origin hero story. So give the hero story about your practice, and then have the ability to point out some important people, like, here's Sally, she does this, here's Jessica, she does that, here's Jeff, she does that. You might see them in this situation. Here's the head assistant. Maybe it's pictures, maybe you actually see them and you can point them out. So this is a really, really awesome office tour. It doesn't take a whole lot. This is probably like a 5 to 10 minute deal here. But for new patients, it's going to go a long way. Guess what? This is going to pay dividends in case acceptance, right? That you're building this groundwork for case acceptance later on. It's not all in the consult, it's before the consult. This is kind of hand in hand with the tour. Engage in small talk, find out their hobbies and interests, make a mental note so you can put this in their chart, get to know the patient. Being mindful of HIPAA and read the room. Like if, you may not want to discuss like clinical stuff when there's other people around, like other patients, etc. But engage with the patients. Like, hey, you love baseball. What's your favorite team? Dodgers? Okay. When they say Dodgers, I'm making a mental note. I'm going to write that down. There's a section in Practice Web. This is actually what that section is meant for. A lot of people use it for like treatment planning and stuff. That's not what it's meant for necessarily, because it doesn't, that's more for the clinical notes. But there's a section underneath the to chart where you can put all these kind of hobby notes and things like that. And then next time you can bring it up. Ask again that when the tour is wrapping, ask them if they have any questions, because it gives them control. And then handoff. So introduce the next professional who's going to be helping. Ideally, the dentist is the first one in the room, but sometimes it might be the hygienist or it could be an assistant. Whatever works. But if you can hand them off to an expert, that's great. Now, scenario 3 is clinical. Greet them warmly with a smile. This is when they come back to the operatory. Greet them warmly with a smile. Use their name. Introduce everyone who might be present in the name. Don't just have the doctor introducing themselves, but then the assistant's just kind of there. Introduce everyone. And then sit at eye level. Very important. Again, it reduces barriers and it reduces noise. Confirm your understanding of their visit. Again, like you do this at the front too when they call, but the back should do this too. Tell them why you think they're there in an open-ended way that encourages feedback. So I understand you're here for a toothache. Pause. Let them fill in the blank. Like, yeah, I'm having this issue, and this is what I called in for. Or please tell me about. You can say please tell me about that if you want. If the pause is awkward, you can say please tell me about that. Now guide them through what's going to happen. Start with a quick overview of the plan. For example, okay, my first assistant here, Sarah, is going to take an X-ray. Then I'll look at the tooth, tell you what's happening with it, and go over your treatment options. Afterward, my treatment coordinator, Mia, will walk you through any costs that you have or any costs that we have and help you with any financial concerns you have. And then watch for affirmations. Look for nodding. Look for like, yes, all that stuff. Remember that, if they're hesitating already, stop and find out what the hesitation is about. So if the patient's already focused on money, they're not going to hear your message during the exam. They're going to be stressed out about money. So you must make sure they're on board at this point before you go further. Next is get permission before starting treatment or making physical contact every time. I'm going to lean your chair back. Okay, is that okay? Get permission. That makes them feel in control. Scenario, or to continue this scenario, is a narration. So as you're doing it, what you're doing, narrate that. If you're checking pocket depths, explain why that's important, how it works, what their depths are. I see a lot of times perio exam, the doctor's just reading out measurements to the assistant who's typing them in. Doctor's not really telling anything to the patient, but you could have a little bit of narration in there, like, here's what I'm doing. Touch base with the patient throughout. A lot of people say, like, raise your hand if you want me to stop or have questions. That's a great start, but you should also know that many patients will not stop you. They're going to get nervous. They're just not going to stop you. So you can pause periodically and give them that opportunity to stop it. And then summarize. Once you've finished, ensure that the patient is upright, and then talk about any findings. Ask open-ended questions again to confirm that they understand. If the patient is not getting a treatment plan, then provide any important documents like post-op instructions. But remember that the reason for this is they're not going to remember everything you said. So you should back it up with documentation. Email and text works best, but you can also give them papers, if like a hard copy if you want. And then remind them how they can get in touch. This is at kind of the end of the clinical part. Remind them how they can get in touch with you. And, you may want to route questions to the front staff or something, but the patient should also feel comfortable coming to the doctor directly and how. So like, for example, Talia at the front desk will help you with all your follow-up needs. But if it's after hours and if you feel it's something that needs my personal attention, I am here for you. My emergency number is on the recording. You can ask the team you can ask the team to give me a message directly. I will get in touch with you. Saying this instead of just having a policy is really important. Hand off to the next person and let the patient know what the next person's role is, and affirm the patient is ready to move on. That's what we were saying earlier. If you remember, I'm not able, I feel rushed, right? You don't want them to feel rushed. So the most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said. So warning signs that a yes means no. When a patient is nodding or saying yes, many, many times it means no, they don't get it. They actually are kind of going like this, shaking their head in their mind. So how can we, and this is actually studies done where by a company called Berlo, they record interactions between doctors and patients and analyze them. So this is really, really scientific stuff. So patients ask an average of 5 questions per 10 minutes. If a patient doesn't ask at least around 5 questions, there could be exceptions to this, but many times it means they're not on board, they're not understanding, they're not engaged. Now, there's also a kind of a male-female divide here, but with a male provider, they may, a male may talk like about 477 words. Female patient may talk more. With a female provider, look how it kind of jumps up. So it may be because they feel more comfortable, like the female is actually emotionally there for them. But there's this male-female divide that you have to be aware of. And what happens again is men and women do interact differently with you. So it does have to be recognized. If they're not taking up more than a third of the talk time, or close to half if the patient is a female provider, that means, again, the patient may not be on board. Lack of engagement, lack of kind of interaction means lack of engagement. Non-words. So if they're saying things like, that can mean that they're tracking, but they're not actually tracking, like they're not actually following you. So you should confirm with them, again, that they understand what you're telling them. Sounds. So like, it's interesting. This company, they captured like laughing and grunting in response to clinical explanations. And the providers actually thought that this was agreement, but actually it was like they weren't agreeing, or they were like, kind of almost disagreeing, or not really on board. So look for those sounds too. And then finally, body language. Watch for the nods. A lot of times they'll actually shake their head no when they're saying yes. Or you can look for furrowed brows, like they're kind of confused, or pursed lips means they're either disagreeing with you or they're confused. So this is why you got to really think about that. Case presentation. We want to make sure, as we said in the promotional material for this webinar, we want to make sure you don't feel salesy, but still get the job done on case presentation. So what are some skills here? Eye level, as treatment needs are discussed, the patient should be upright in the chair and talking at an eye level. Use the patient's name. This is like almost always a go-to whenever you're having a discussion. Start simple. Use the simplest treatment option. A lot of times we start with like the biggest one and kind of pare it down. And that's like another strategy where you start big, like, you know, huge dollar amount, and then you kind of make them feel like you're saving them money and make it smaller and smaller. But sometimes that can backfire. So start with a simple one and then maybe work into the more complex. You might want to reverse that flow. So explain why the more complex one is costly and why you might be proposing it. State the preference. So don't be afraid to say, I think this is the best solution for you and why. They're looking for you to like lead them to the water. So, you know, but at the end of the day, then you give them the option. Use a lot of visual aids. So we have a lot of stuff in Practice Web. I'm going to show you that right now. Here. We have a ton of stuff. So you have all your panos and x-rays you can show them in Practice Web. You can show them the treatment plan, which has the tooth chart on there. You can show them the perio chart. There's a graphical perio chart in Practice Web. If you're not using that, you better start using it because it really helps discussing gum health and perio needs. So use all that stuff that you have at your disposal. Now, dentists should, this is controversial, but the dentist should be the first one to bring up the cost. And again, you may disagree with me on this, but there's a reason. Like, you don't need to go over all the details, but they should at least be able to explain why certain things cost more, right? Why is there such a big jump when we're going to different things? That'll really help out your TC, your treatment coordinator, or your assistant, whoever's doing the full presentation, if you're not doing it. Without the step, the patient's more likely to have fee confusion or wonder if they're being overcharged, right? If they hear from the expert, they're not going to feel as much or as likely to be, hey, this is like an overcharge or being gouged. So, you know, they may just blow it off if you don't get involved. So that's what happens a lot of times. You know, you may have this experience where the doctor presents something and then it looks like the patient's on board. They're kind of nodding, doing all these cues that you think is an affirmation. And then they check later in the day, hey, by the way, did Jim like go ahead and sign up for that treatment? Oh no, like he said he wanted to think about it. He wasn't too excited. Like, what just, I mean, he was excited when he was with me. It must be your fault. So it's not always a TC's fault. It could be like, hey, we're not doing enough as a provider. So, you know, explaining like scaling and route planning is not always a cleaning covered by insurance at 100%. You know, if you charge a PPE fee right now, a per visit fee, a copay, the patient should kind of hear from the dentist when it makes sense, why your office is different than other offices on these things. Next is send materials home, get the patient printed materials or send it to them via text and email. I prefer electronic just because then they always have it, but you can do print if you also, and kind of maybe do both. Confirm that the patient understands. Again, what questions do you have for me? Don't be scared of questions and just try to get them to sign. Get that hesitation out of the way, get it in the open. Do you have questions? What questions do you have for me? Hand off. The patient should not shift patient to other team members until the patient says they're ready to go to the next phase. So discussing cost factors. This is now getting into the TC phase of things. The dentist may very well do this, but it may be like a TC or a assistant. Ensure the patient understands all the factors involved in the final fee, and of course verify that or tell them that estimates are not guaranteed for insurance. You know, there's a potential that when we get in there, it could be something worse than what we thought. So here's what would happen in that case, so that they're not surprised during the operation. They're going to be, oh yeah, I remember Sally mentioned that this may get worse and it may cost more, etc. Yeah, let's proceed, right? They can just tell you in the operatory when we actually do it. Cover payment options. The front office can discuss those payment options to really empower the patients. Nowadays, it's never really a cost factor for a lot of people, like the overall cost. It's more, can I afford to pay all this right now? We are in a subscription monthly payment culture right now. Everyone is paying things, Netflix, Amazon, Prime, Costco, you know, everything is paid on subscription and everyone's fine with it. Do you think Costco is going to tell them like, hey, 5 years, it's going to cost you $1,000 to do this thing. Do you want to do it? No. They're going to say it's $10, $20 a month for this fee. You get all these great things and they're going to sign up. So it's a lot of times it's just giving them that payment option and not giving the huge like scary number and that's all you focus on. Scheduling is get it on the schedule. So don't just have it signed and all that, or let me think about it. Get it on the schedule. And you can say, if someone resists, I know you have these concerns, but I'd hate to forget about you or have you wait for an appointment. Dr. Smith gets booked up like 2 months solid, and let's get this on the calendar. If something changes, you can always call and we can bump it out, right? Get it on the schedule. That's going to be cool too with the reminders. They're going to start getting those reminders. It's going to push them towards the treatment. The next thing, when they kind of say here, let me think about it, right? They're going to say, let me think about it. Identify the concern. What's holding you back from treatment? Talk about it, get it in the open, and then solve the problem. So confidence, for that one, build confidence by repeating the options, educating the patient, get them involved in the treatment choice. If you have patient education videos, that's really great here too. Show them a video, get them eased up for this. You can also, if they're questioning the doctor's judgment, hey, it's awesome if you figure that out instead of just being in the dark. If they're like, I don't know if the doctor's actually, I think he's blowing this out of proportion, get that in the open, right? And then maybe offer to refer them over to a specialist if they really need to and get like a second, confirmation about this. But most patients with good doctors will realize the doctor's not misleading them, and they'll just be satisfied by you just offering that, right? Sometimes just offer that and they'll be good. So eventually, yeah, like you want to get their confidence there. And then fears wise, a lot of like third of the population has some degree of dental anxiety. So if they have some triggers, let them know what you're going to do to take care of that. We're going to, if there's medication involved, if there's blankets, if there's music, if there's breaks during the treatment, get them eased up about the treatment fears that's preventing them from accepting. Remind them that they're going to be in control about what happens in the chair and that they can step anytime they want, pretty much. Payment, we already kind of touched on that, but let them understand their balances and what impacts that. Try to apply whatever discounts you can, whether it's PPO fees, cash pay discounts, membership plans, secondary insurance, health insurance in general, whatever you can do to bring that number down, and then go over payment plans right away, really quick. We offer in-house financing called DocPay. It's much better than something like a care credit because DocPay takes a lot less of a cut. I think it's like 1% versus care credit somewhere around 10%. Break up the appointments as well. That's the last point there. Break up the appointments if it's a concern for them. And then last thing, solve the problem, find the bottom line. So there could be another decision maker. As I said, the spouse is involved, but you can basically, what would make them say no, right? Address that, get it in the open. Time, if the patient has a tight schedule, they may want to get on the schedule right now, or they get a preferred time and day. Help them out, get them their ideal time and day. That could be what's preventing them. Yeah, I know I need to get done. I can definitely pay for it. I just don't, my life's really busy right now. I just don't have the time for like half a day to come in. So figure out, what you can do to work with them. Shorten appointments, do full quadrant appointments, same day treatment, all of that stuff. Now, if we talk about cancellations, and there's handling cancellations and there's avoiding cancellations. So to avoid cancellations, use text messaging, use email reminders. We've covered this in the patient recall and reactivation secrets webinar, but essentially, especially if you're doing hygiene recare, 6 minutes before when you schedule, save the date text. 4 weeks before, initial reminder text. 7 days before, confirmation text. 1 day before, final reminder. This will really avoid, but if you do get a cancellation, have a written policy. So you should always have a written policy on this. The patient should sign the policy. For example, double booking, when there's no shows. There's all these different strategies. They may or may not work, but whatever your strategy is, like a flat fee if they cancel late, that usually works really well. Maybe there's a dismissal rule. Like if you do this like 3 times, you're gone. Like a 3 strikes rule. You're not going to be a patient here. Have them take this seriously and explain it to them. So here in Practice Hub, you can set up that form. If you need help with that, let us know. But you can have that as in your forms. And then also there's this really great underused feature in Practice Hub called the Wiki, WIKI. So here's where you can have like FAQs. This is more for your staff. What if this happens? What if that happens? You can have policies so that internally everyone's on the same page. It's not like Sally approves one thing and then Jessica's really strict on it. Everyone follows the same thing. You can have that in your wiki. Let us know if you want us to help you set that up. Remind. So we have that text messaging, but You can tell them also during intake, doctor sets aside time for you. When patients don't show up, that means someone else who needed to be seen cannot be seen. So do that, and then give them the cancellation policy reminder and how that goes. Empathize. So, if they say, hey, I need to cancel, oh no, I'd hate to see you fall out of the schedule, but here you can kind of empathize with them, and that tooth was really bothering you, so I wanted to make sure we take care of that. Wasn't that the tooth that the doctor was really worried about? Shoot, we're booked out for the next 2 months. I'd hate to see you wait. I'd hate to see you lose your spot. So there's all these things you can do to try to have them keep it. A lot of times they have silly reasons to cancel. Maybe they woke up late or something. Like, hey, it's cool, like, if you come in 10 minutes late, we'll take care of you. Just come in, right? We'd hate to have you lose your spot. Empathize. Enforce. So you have to get your little kind of police hat on here and start gently. Mention the policy that, like, the Dr. Patel had a whole hour set aside for you. Are you sure there's no chance you can make it? Then you use the policy as a nudge. Well, unfortunately, we do have this policy, or not. I wouldn't even use the word unfortunately, because it's not like we did anything wrong. It's the policy. We do have a 48-hour cancellation policy. There's a $50 charge, and that will be placed on your account if you can't make it. And we've talked about this in your initial exam. And then note the professionalism here. Don't say I. Use like we, and our office has it. So kind of, it's not like you're being a hard person on them. It's just the policy. And so that's kind of the thing. And then help them. Maybe you have a policy where if they get rescheduled, you waive that. Who knows, right? So if you have that, get them rescheduled. And also add them to your ASAP list in Practice Hub as a courtesy to get them in earlier, right? So, and that's over here, the ASAP list. Following up with patients. These are patients like they're like, yeah, I don't know right now, or I can't reschedule right now, or let me think about it. All those patients, we give you all these tools, and a lot of people, I get surprised, they don't even use these appointment lists, but we help you fill those holes in your schedule and also target patients. Now, when you're targeting them, be prepared. Read the patient's history when you're trying to get them back in the office for something they didn't get scheduled yet. Read their history, understand their needs, check their account balances and insurance coverage, identify any pushback that they may have about coming in, and then use their preferences. So if they prefer texting, then text them first. Don't call them about getting them back in. You might get a faster response too. Make it personal. So hey, Dr. Patel was asking about you today when I had my meeting, or the hygienist was trying to see what's going on with you, because I know they know you were waiting, or you were hurting, sorry, and you were waiting to figure out your financing stuff. So make it personal. Like, we're not just doing follow-up calls here, where we actually can care. Explain the benefits of things like preventive care. If it's like a hygiene thing, it's going to make sure you don't have major problems in the future. Give more than just like you're due to come in again, right? And we'd like to take care of this. If it's about starting treatment, maybe it's Q3, Q4 of the year, and they need to get in before their benefits expire. Let them know. Push back. If they're pushing back, then give them other options like financing, and then take a lot of notes. You can use the comm log in Practice Hub to take notes while you're on the phone, and get that in the file so everyone knows. And that's kind of what it's showing here in the comm log. So have that recorded, and then you can see that in the comm log. Last thing I'm going to go through this quickly is billing. So bill instantly. This is a tough communication scenario, so that's where we're covering it. Bill instantly, get payment at the time of service. If a balance is left over after insurance, send a bill instantly. And this conveys that your payment is important to the patient. You can use pay by text. That does this for you. You can do pay by text to bill instantly. And they can really, pay from their phone. So really, really easy. Now, what this does is you're using technology to prevent awkward conversations. That's why this is part of the communications webinar here. Use technology to prevent awkward conversations. Have clear statements. And again, actually, that is another form of communication. The text is a form of communication, not just the verbal stuff. Use the statements. We take care of this for you. We have really clear statements. Dunning messages. You can customize your dunning messages. If they're really past due, you can have a more strict message on there. This is all in the billing options webinar. Now, get on the phone. So if it's a billing issue, it's 60 days past due, get on the phone, call them, have a conversation. Now, the client who can't pay, empathize with them. Maybe there's a hardship, empathize with them. and accept their situation. Offer them options. Again, doc pay. There's a lot of stuff you can do to get it worked out. Ask what they want. How do you want to handle this? What option do you want? And then go from there, and put it in writing. So what you can do here is you can create a payment plan if they can't pay the balance off. There's a payment plan, great feature in Practice Web. Get that taken care of, and then you can send it to them as well, so they know. I think this is the last scenario. So sales and marketing, make it targeted. Appointment lists, you can use it there. You have text messaging there. Don't send overdue reminders to everyone. Target specific groups. We talked about, the model of communications. That all applies here with the Berlo model. So for example, in person, you might say, Dr. Smith says you're a candidate for whitening. Is that something you'd like to explore? This is kind of a non-sales way to let them know that this is an option. Or because filling colors can be changed after they're done, now's the time to whiten if it's something you've ever considered. Do you want to hear about how that works, right? Use that model. Texting, you might have like another nice text message, like text back brighter for complimentary tooth whitening for your next visit. Email, you might want to say $200 off whitening and then have links to learn all about it. So there's all these kind of things you can do. And then benefits focus, talk about how that's going to help them. And then educational, make it educational as well for sales and marketing. Patient complaint. So quickly here, patient complaint, don't downplay a complaint, empathize with them, accept their concern, be on their side, be their advocate, that you're going to help them resolve the issue, whatever it is. Don't get defensive, very easy to get defensive. You might actually start very nice, and then as the conversation goes on, you get angry and defensive. Don't go there, it doesn't ever help. You can state the facts, but you don't want to get defensive. Listen carefully, control the situation, ask them what they want ultimately, like what's going to be a good, happy day for you? How can we solve this? When there's an action plan, reiterate the action plan, and then make sure you execute, make sure you implement that. These are like the fundamentals. And a lot of times, oh yeah, I know this, I know all this stuff. We don't execute, we don't implement. So make it like a checklist on put a little Post-it note and have these 8 points on there anytime you get, so everyone remembers, right? You never know when a moment and a few sincere words can have an impact on a life, right? So that's kind of the deal there with the complaint stuff. So you can get feedback through our review service. I'm just going to plug it there, but you can get feedback, and that's really important so you know whether you're doing well on communication. Last thing I want to say here, we have special offers. Practice Web support, if you're not on it, $109 a month, really, really good. You get the free CE with that. And we're going to do a ton of CE, like every single month, 1 or 2 CE webinars. We also have texting, 30 days free, 50% off. It's $89 a month. We're going to waive the setup fee. This is good through the end of the month, the offer. PW newsletter, same 30 days off, 50%, 30 days free and 50% off. And that's actually a low price of $39 a month. That's, again, great communication tool. And then Smart Caller ID. This is great to be prepared when someone calls and maximize your phone calls. And that's $99 a month. And we're going to waive the setup fee, and we'll give you a free trial. So this is all like try before you buy type of stuff, free trials, and you might as well go for that to help with your communication. And if you package these together, you get another discount of $120 per year each time you package each additional tool. And with that, you're ready to communicate effectively. If you want help, call a support team. We're going to help you out with any of these strategies. And you can also request support from our website if you don't want to, kind of call in and just have us call you. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice day. Goodbye.